Hello, I'm Gary Stearman of Prophecy Watchers in studio with Bob Ulrich. Bob, let's do a little reminiscing on our 9th anniversary here.
9 years, is that really possible that we've launched Prophecy Watchers 9 years ago? Seems like just yesterday.
It does.
In fact, I was just on our YouTube channel recently and I scrolled all the way back to our first television program. Do you remember that?
Our first television program in my dining room, in my living room, they sort of adjoin each other. And we set up a camera and started out in very modest circumstances. And we were able to film for, let's put it this way, limited periods of time, sometimes attenuated by a lawnmower being started at the neighbor's house, right?
I remember it well.
Oh, yes. But Bob, it's been a miracle. I have to say that the birth of Prophecy Watchers was the result of a kind of partnership that you and I had over the years prior to our starting Prophecy Watchers at Prophecy in the News with J.R. Church. We go back a long way.
Yeah, I'd like to call it a friendship rather than a partnership. But, I had been following your work for many, many years before I moved to Oklahoma in 1993. And it was literally a dream for me to work for J.R. Church and the legendary Gary Stearman.
Not that.
You were there for 25 years.
I
I was
was
there for 20 years, serving the Lord. And 9 years ago, we made a decision to branch out on our own. J.R. had passed away.
Yes.
And we made, at the time, what was a very difficult, monumental decision to start a new ministry. A lot of prayer, a lot of counsel before we made that decision, walking away from security, walking away with no money, no mailing list, no place to work. And we started this ministry 9 years ago, like I like to say, on a Stearman wing and a prayer. Now, I want you to talk a little bit about the Stearman wing and really kind of your background, and I'll tell you why. Most people watching today, a lot of you don't really know who we are. Thanks to Daystar, our program is now exploding literally all over the world. A lot of people are watching us here today, many for the first time. They watch us on Daystar, they watch us on DirecTV, the Dish Network, TV stations all over the country, but they really don't know our story. How do ministries get started? How did you get started in the ministry?
Well, the way I got started was actually by writing. By nature, I love to write. And I was a writer for a couple of major aircraft companies in Wichita. My family is an aircraft family. The Stearman family goes back to the 30s. And then comes forward to other companies like Beechcraft and Boeing and Cessna, and all of my relatives in my family were involved somehow in aviation. And I thought that I would be too, for the rest of my life, as a matter of fact, until several things changed. And I came to Oklahoma City, I guess I should say on a wing and a prayer, Bob, after a total life change, which I don't think I'll go into right now, but privately I can talk to you about it. When I came to Oklahoma City, I began to write Christian materials. And I began to associate myself with a number of really fine Christian gentlemen. We got together and we started a community Bible church. And I began to teach at that church. And Bob, that ended up being a 33-year assignment. You remember the church.
I've been there several times.
And at the same time, I became acquainted with the late J.R. Church of Prophecy in the News. He and I talked about a project that he was doing, and he said, Gary, would you like to come over to Prophecy in the News and help me finish that project? It was called Hidden Prophecies in the Psalms. And I did. I worked with JR until we developed a book that came out of that, and it became a good start and a great seller and a great conversation starter, I might add. But that led me onward, and Bob came to work a bit later after I had been at Prophecy in the News for a few years.
You know, you told me something years ago when I first met you. Really interesting that when you and JR went into a room together to study the Bible, a third person showed up. And
it was like that.
And it wasn't me. And I know you guys, had a great working relationship for the 25 years you were there, and kind of laid the foundation, the study foundation for Prophecy Watchers today, the things we talk about, the things we study. My story is radically different. In some ways, you and I are like oil and water. You came, from an aviation family. I came from a real estate family. I graduated from Christian college. I went to work for Hostess Cake, where I actually was robbed 4 times at gunpoint and kidnapped. And it didn't take me long to figure out that I need to find a different job. Somehow miraculously, and literally miraculously was an understatement, I became a wealthy land developer in New Jersey. And it's a really kind of weird thing that happened to me over time. In 1991, shortly after the Gulf War, I rededicated my life to the Lord. And all the things that had gone so right and made so much money and been so successful started going south. And the other end of the spectrum was my love for Bible prophecy increased. And so as my money disappeared, my love for prophecy just grew and grew and grew to the point where it became an obsession. And really, it was a dream for me to ever think about being in the ministry. Really never crossed my mind. I had moved to Colorado Springs to develop a very large land development project there. I was there for probably 5 months when I got a fax one day from my business partners in New Jersey, who basically told me that they were buying me out of the company. They sent me a $10 million buyout agreement. And I thought, wow, I've got it made now. I can actually go to Oklahoma and work for J.R. Church and Gary Stearman. Well, long story short, I never collected a penny of that money. But in God's unique way, he took me from New Jersey to Colorado Springs to Oklahoma City, the last place I ever expected to land. That was 30 years ago, Gary. September 5th, 1993, 8 days before the Oslo Accords.
Wow.
Now, if you're a prophecy follower, you realize that the Oslo Accords were really about dividing the land of Israel. I thought I was about to have the shortest, executive career in history. 8 days away from the rapture, and here we are 30 years later, still waiting for that time. But, let's go back 9 years ago, because, you and I made a decision to start a ministry from scratch. Difficult decision. Some people would questioned our sanity, to be honest with you, why we would do this.
Well, we had worked together at Prophecy in the News, and J.R. Church passed away, and it changed everything. And that's when we found ourselves sitting in my living room, or my dining room, and just discussing this thing. Where do we go from here? And we found a little camera, and a little camera operator, I should say, and we, on an impromptu basis, began to film segments that might be suitable for broadcasting on the internet, right?
I'm chuckling here because I remember the days that camera was only good for 12 minutes of recording, and then it would suddenly turn off with no warning. It would overheat. And we're shooting programs, and we're literally sitting there with bated breath thinking, can I get one more sentence in? Do I have to stop now? And then, boom, just like that, the camera would turn off, and we would lose the whole program and have to start over. So, dealing with that frustration, something really unusual happened. We had a little one room at your church office that was our shipping headquarters. And late one night, my wife and I came home, and as I pulled my car into the driveway, I got a text message. This had to be 11 o'clock at night. And the text message came from a faraway country, actually about 9,500 miles away. And the text message came from a friend, and it said, I commit a $100,000 gift to Prophecy Watchers to help you launch this new ministry. Yeah. And I've got a verse here. In fact, this really kind of makes me smile as I read it, because I think back to that moment in time that really is frozen in my memory. And it says, remember the former things of old, for I am God, there is no other. I am God, there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning. Well, that's Bible prophecy right there. And from ancient times, things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, I will do all my pleasure. Calling a bird of prey from the east, the man who executes my counsel from a far country. Well, I've often thought about that because this gentleman who made the donation, I call him the man from the east, from a far country.
Wow.
And I don't know if that verse in the Bible has anything to do with him, but it sure rings true to me. And that $100,000 donation launched the ministry. It helped us purchase new television cameras. Where do you think those cameras are today?
Well, I've heard stories about where they are, but before we talk about that, I have to say that the man behind the cameras has been an incredible asset to Prophecy Watchers. It's Tyler. So, Tyler, for all the work that you do in shooting and editing and things that I don't even understand, thank you so very much.
He does a lot of things he doesn't get credit for sure.
Absolutely.
So there's TV cameras.
Yes.
They're actually in Mexico today at a church. As time went by and we were able to upgrade, we got new cameras that are obviously much better. We sold those cameras to Tom Hughes. Tom Hughes used them for a while and then put them in a new church that he's part of starting down in Mexico. So if you gave originally, made a donation for those cameras, they're still being put to good use in another ministry.
They really are. Now, I want to say something about the times and the seasons. We're not date setters, Bob, although we jokingly talk to each other and say, all Christians are date setters, but they just keep it a secret. But what I want to say is that we live in incredibly dramatic times in terms of Christian studies, and particularly in terms of Christian prophecy. Who hasn't read about Ezekiel 38 and Gog coming down from the north? And who hasn't read the news today, Bob, and watched what's going on in Ukraine and Russia? And scratched their head a little bit and said, this looks an awful lot like Bible prophecy. These are the times in which we live.
Well, a lot of people are using the term the coming convergence.
Yes.
And we're watching so many things, fit into the paradigm of prophecy that, words really can't express it. In fact, fresh off the press this morning, this was my late night proofreading last night, is the October issue of the Prophecy Watchers magazine. And there's an article in here from a man by the name of John Salome, who most people probably don't know, and it's called Out of Time. And it's a fascinating article. As I was sitting reading it last night, I was thinking, this is like one of the best articles I've ever read in our magazine. He took the DeLorean car and he used it to build an object lesson about the rapture of the church. And the title of the article is Out of Time, and used it to correlate the fact that we're almost out of time here on earth. And he went through all of the details and all the things we're seeing. Transhumanism, the cashless society, wars, earthquakes, famines, corruption, all the signs of the times we see in the Bible. They're all here.
Does he? Now, I haven't read the article yet, but does he talk about that famous car?
He does.
88 miles an hour.
He does. Yeah, we're almost at 88 miles an hour, Gary. There's another interesting article in here. I'll tell you, this is one of the best issues we've ever published. You wrote this article, Gary. It's called The Bow of the Antichrist. And people are going to hear about this very soon at our conference in Norman, which is just 3 weeks away. But, talk a little bit about the two words in the Bible that use the word bow. They're Greek words, and there's a correlation between God's rainbow and something else. And I think it's a critical, important prophecy.
I think it's becoming critical because the rainbow has become a powerful symbol globally, the world over. That bow has become a symbol for action, almost like there is an agreement that we're all going to move at the same time into a brave new world. And that's the bow. And I was intrigued by that because there's someone else who arises with a bow. And he's riding a white horse. And he's pretending to be a hero here to save the world. And he turns out to be the Antichrist. And for years, I and other pastor teachers have taught about this man, saying, well, he has a bow, but no arrows. Why isn't he carrying arrows with his bow? And over the years, I've studied this, and the Greek word for that bow is toxon. If you go back to the Septuagint and the narrative about Noah following the flood, God gives Noah a sign and a covenant, and it's the bow. And it's called by the same Greek word in the Septuagint as the bow that the Antichrist carries. So God's covenant and a covenant falsely offered by the Antichrist use the same Greek word. And I started wondering, Bob, is there a connection there? And what is that bow that the Antichrist is carrying? If he is an Antichrist, i.e. false Christ, then he would be offering a false covenant, and it might look a little like the bow.
Well, once again, Satan loves to duplicate the things that God calls good. In fact, as I was reading your article, in fact, I sent you a text in the wee hours of the morning last night saying this is a brilliant, brilliant piece of writing. But you made a comment in the article about the rainbow. Who hasn't looked up in the sky to see a beautiful rainbow and just awe and amazement? It's something only God can create, only something God can do. And here comes Satan, as always, the great deceiver, stealing God's goodness and turning it into something anti-God, anti-Christ.
And that's what he does. And that's why he's called the Antichrist, the false Christ. If he didn't come offering something that looked really, really good, shall we say, almost like a rainbow in the sky, a covenantal rainbow. If he didn't bring something that looked really good, Bob, he would never be initially successful.
Well, Gary, who can forget the White House being lit up in the colors of the fake rainbow? Something that'll stick with Christians for a long time. Now, there's another great article in here. In fact, I don't want to go into every article. This is an amazing issue. Mondo has written about the red heifer.
Yes.
And this is big news now over in Israel. And Mondo has written a book about it that really is eye-opening. The month of October is prime season to really identify these heifers and whether they qualify as the sacrifice that the Jewish rabbis are looking for to purify and cleanse the third temple.
Bob, as I go back and think about where we came from, how the Lord has guided our steps, from a living room setting into a studio setting, into a large building with 2 studios, and think about the blessing that the Lord has given us and the expanding audience, I can only conclude that there is a message to be delivered, and the Lord has graciously provided us with part of the solution to delivering that message in today's world. And that's the way we come to you. And we hope to continue until Jesus comes. And when that's going to be, couldn't be far away.
Gary, the one sentence that comes to mind for me is, look what God has done. Not only has he given us this beautiful, magnificent facility to preach the gospel and spread the word, he's taken us to the Daystar Network all over the world, DirecTV and the Dish Network here in America. He's enabled us to publish a magazine. We have a very, very popular Roku channel. Our YouTube channel is exploding. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but we had over 1 million people watch the videos we're producing. So we're getting the word out. We're working harder than ever, to really spread the gospel far and wide, not just here in America, but all across the country. This morning, Mondo is in the UK, and he's going to be preaching at a church in Bristol. He's on his way to Scotland. He's on his way to Ireland. He's on his way to San Remo, Italy. We have another missionary outreach planned for Australia, for New Zealand next year. And so this is a mission that God has put in front of us to not just keep prophecy here in America, but to take the message to the whole world. And it's exciting. Yeah, it's exciting times.
Bob, we're grateful to the Lord for what he has allowed us to do. We're grateful for his blessing, and we are grateful for you,
Amen,
the faithful followers of Prophecy Watchers. I think we have probably just pretty well summarized who we are, and what our plans are Actually, Bob, do we really know what our plans are? The Lord could change our direction in a heartbeat, and we're willing to follow His leading.
You mean at 88 miles an hour? That's what we're looking for. We're not looking for the Antichrist. We're looking for Jesus Christ.
Amen. I'm Gary Stearman. And by the way, what I always say at the conclusion of these broadcasts is, hey, we're watching. You keep watching too.